The stars outside the ship's window looked calm, but inside Daniel Cross's heart, a storm was rising. He was not a soldier, not a warrior. He was a diplomat. Yet his mission was more dangerous than any battle. For the first time in history, humanity was meeting the Zerath Dominion, an alien empire so powerful that most star systems feared their name. And Daniel, an ordinary man from Earth, had been chosen to speak for his people. Daniel sat at the edge of his chair, his hands folded, tightly together. The conference chamber aboard the Zerath flagship was enormous, built with black steel and glowing lines of silver. The air was heavy, almost cold, as if the room itself wanted to remind visitors that they were not welcome. Around him, members of the human delegation whispered nervously. They had all read the reports. The Zerath were not known for mercy. At the far end of the chamber, tall golden doors opened. A hush fell over the room. From the shadows, she appeared, Queen Serenia of the Zerath Dominion. She was unlike anything Daniel had expected. Her tall, slender figure carried a presence that silenced every breath. Her eyes were bright like twin suns, sharp and piercing, and her face was calm but unreadable. Her long silver hair fell around her shoulders, shining under the pale light of the chamber. Every step she took echoed against the cold floor. The Zerath soldiers bowed their heads as she entered, but Serenia did not even glance at them. She moved straight to the throne at the center and sat with effortless grace. She looked at the humans, her gaze traveling over each face like a blade. No one spoke. Finally, her voice broke the silence, smooth, clear, and commanding. "You have crossed into my dominion. State your purpose." Daniel's chest tightened. This was the moment he had prepared for, the reason he had left Earth and traveled light years away. He rose to his feet, trying to keep his voice steady. "I am Daniel Cross. I represent the people of Earth. We come to you in peace, seeking understanding and dialogue." He expected her usual cold expression, perhaps a dismissive wave of her hand. But something happened that shocked everyone in the chamber. The queen froze. Her golden eyes widened, and for the first time, her calm mask cracked. A flicker of recognition passed across her face. Her fingers tightened slightly on the armrest of her throne. The air itself seemed to grow heavier, as though the universe had paused to listen. Serenia leaned forward, her eyes locked on him. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, almost trembling. "It can't be," she whispered. The words were so quiet that at first Daniel thought he had imagined them. But the room had fallen into such complete silence that every person heard them. Gasps rose from the Zerath soldiers. The human delegation exchanged confused looks. Daniel stood frozen, unsure of what to say. He had only spoken his name, nothing more. Why had it shaken her so deeply? The queen quickly straightened, regaining her composure, but her eyes did not leave Daniel. Her calm mask was back, yet there was something new beneath it, an emotion that none of her people had ever seen before. Fear. She raised her hand, and the chamber guards immediately stood at attention. "Leave us," she commanded. "But my queen," one officer began. "Now!" Her voice cut through the air like a blade. The soldiers obeyed, leaving only the queen, Daniel, and the two delegations. But even then, Serenia's eyes never broke away from him. Daniel cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the moment. "Your Majesty, is something wrong?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. She seemed to be debating with herself. For a moment, she looked less like a ruler and more like someone staring at a ghost. Finally, she rose from her throne. "You," she said slowly, almost as if she was speaking to herself. "Your name. Speak it again." Daniel hesitated. He glanced at the human delegation, who looked just as lost as he felt. Still, He obeyed. Daniel Cross. Her breath caught sharply. She closed her eyes, whispering something in her own language, words he could not understand. When she opened them again, there was fire in her gaze. "Do you know what that name means?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "It is just my family name. My father was a teacher. My mother was a doctor. Nothing more." Her expression darkened. But Daniel could see something else in her eyes now, something he could not place. Fear, wonder, memory. The queen stepped closer. Each move she made seemed to press down on the room, as if her presence carried weight. When she stood just a few feet from him, Daniel could feel the intensity of her gaze. "There is nothing ordinary about that name," Serenia whispered. Behind Daniel, the humans shifted uncomfortably. None of them knew what was happening, but they all understood one thing. Something far beyond diplomacy had just begun. The queen studied him for another long moment, then suddenly turned away. "The meeting is over. Return to your ship." "What?" "But, Your Majesty," one of the human diplomats protested. "Go." The tone of her voice left no room for argument. The humans slowly gathered themselves and began to leave, confusion painted across every face. Daniel lingered for a moment, still trying to understand what had just happened. He opened his mouth to ask, but Serenia's eyes flashed with warning. He closed it again. As he turned to leave, he caught one final whisper. From her lips, so faint it might have been meant only for herself. The prophecy. Daniel left the chamber with his mind burning with questions. Why had his name shaken the most feared queen in the galaxy? What prophecy had she spoken of? And why, deep inside his chest, did a strange feeling tell him that his life would never be the same again? Outside the chamber, the stars still burned quietly, but Daniel knew the universe had just shifted. The doors of the throne chamber closed behind Daniel, but the queen did not move. She stood frozen, her silver hair falling across her shoulders as her thoughts spiraled back into memories she had long buried. Her advisors approached carefully, exchanging nervous glances. One brave minister finally spoke. "My queen, why does this human disturb you?" Serenia's golden eyes narrowed. She did not answer. Instead, she turned and walked away from the chamber. Her guards quickly followed. But even they were silent. Something about her expression told them not to ask questions. Inside her private chambers, Serenia dismissed everyone. The heavy doors sealed, and the queen was alone. She moved to the far side of the room, where a great wall of crystal tablets shimmered faintly in the light. These were the ancient archives of her ancestors, records so old that many had been forgotten, sealed away under command of past rulers. With a wave of her hand, the crystals shifted, forming words and images in the air. She searched for one name, Cross. The archives reacted instantly. Lines of text scrolled across the glowing air until they stopped at a passage she had only read once in her youth. It was the prophecy of the Shadow Age. In the time when darkness rises from the edges of the stars, when the swarm of shadows devours the light, a human shall come. He shall carry the name Cross, and his choice will either end the galaxy or save it. Serenia's hand trembled as she read the words again. She had dismissed them as legend before, myths meant to frighten or inspire. But the moment, Daniel. Cross spoke his name. Something deep inside her had recognized the truth. She remembered stories passed down in her royal bloodline. Long ago, before the Zerath Dominion was even born, there had been a wanderer, a human, or something that looked like one who had walked among the stars. He had appeared in her ancestors' records, spoken in strange riddles, and then vanished into time. His name, Cross. And now, after centuries, another had appeared. Serenia whispered into the empty room. Is fate playing its hand at last? Meanwhile, Daniel was back aboard the human ship, his mind heavy with confusion. His fellow diplomats whispered endlessly, trying to guess why the Queen had reacted so strangely. Some thought it was a trick. Others thought it was a sign of weakness. Daniel sat apart from them, staring out the window at the stars. He could not forget the way her voice had trembled. He could not forget the words she had whispered. It can't be. That night, as he drifted into uneasy sleep, he began to dream. The dream was unlike anything he had experienced before. He saw entire star systems burning, planets falling into silence, and a vast swarm of black ships spreading across the void like a shadow. He heard screams echoing across the galaxy, voices crying for help, and through it all, he saw a figure, standing in the darkness, tall, cloaked, holding out a hand. "Cross," the figure said. Daniel jolted awake, his heart racing. Sweat covered his face, though the room was cool. He tried to calm himself, telling himself it was only a dream. But deep down, something in his bones whispered that it was more. The next day, a message came. "Daniel Cross, the Queen summons you. Alone." The human delegation argued fiercely against it, but the Queen's command could not be refused, so Daniel once again found himself walking through the tall golden doors of the throne chamber. Except this time, the hall was empty. No guards, no advisors, only the Queen, waiting for him. Her eyes followed him as he approached. She looked calm, but Daniel could sense tension beneath the surface. "You have questions," Serenia said. "I do," Daniel replied. His voice was steady, though inside he felt the weight of the moment. "Why did you react to my name like that? What does it mean?" The Queen studied him for a long moment, as if deciding whether he was ready to hear the truth. Finally, she turned and walked toward the crystal archives at the side of the chamber. She touched one, and the words of the prophecy appeared in the air. Daniel read them slowly, his lips moving with each word. His stomach tightened. This is about me?" "Perhaps," Serenia answered. "Perhaps not. Prophecies are dangerous things. They can trap the mind, shape the future in ways it was never meant to be shaped. My ancestors buried these words to keep them from guiding weak hearts. And yet," she turned to him. Her eyes softened, only slightly. "When you spoke your name, something inside me knew. You are connected to this. Somehow." Daniel shook his head, struggling to understand. "I'm not special. I'm not a soldier, not a hero. I'm just a man." The Queen stepped closer. "And yet the galaxy does not care what you believe. It will drag you into its storms regardless." Daniel thought of his dream. He thought of the burning worlds and the shadow that spread across the stars. He swallowed hard. "I've seen things, visions, maybe dreams. A swarm in the darkness." Serenia froze again, her gaze sharpened. "The shadow swarm," she whispered. Daniel frowned. "You know them?" Her face darkened. "Long ago, before even your Earth discovered the stars, the shadow swarm came. They consume everything. Planets, fleets, civilizations. We fought them, and we believed we destroyed them. But if your dreams are true, then they are returning." Silence filled the chamber. Daniel felt as if the air itself had turned heavy. He could hardly breathe. Finally, Serenia spoke again. "If you truly carry the name of the prophecy, then you are either the key to our salvation or the reason the galaxy burns." Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to deny it, but the memory of the dream silenced him. Deep inside, he already knew. The Queen turned away, her voice low. "I should kill you now, before fate has its chance to decide." Daniel froze. His hand twitched, but he forced himself not to step back. He met her gaze, and though fear twisted inside him, his voice came out calm. "If you believe in fate, then killing me won't change it. And if you don't, then let me prove myself." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then slowly, her lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile, not of kindness, but of recognition. "You speak boldly for a human," Serenia said. "Very well. For now, you live." Daniel felt the weight of her words press deep into his soul. He had walked into this meeting seeking peace between their people. But now he carried something far greater, a destiny he did not understand, a prophecy that tied his very name to the survival of the galaxy. And far beyond the borders of both human space and the Zerath Dominion, in the cold silence of the outer stars, something dark began to stir. Daniel Cross walked through the silent corridors of the Zerath Palace, his mind heavy with questions. Every step echoed against the tall black walls, making him feel smaller than ever. He had come here as a diplomat, but after the Queen's words, he no longer felt like one. A prophecy, a name tied to fate, dreams of shadows swallowing the stars. He tried to tell himself it was nonsense, but deep inside, he knew it wasn't. He had felt the truth in her voice when she spoke of the shadow, swarm. The guard who escorted him stopped outside a set of tall silver doors. "Wait here," the soldier said coldly, then vanished down the hall. The doors opened on their own, and Daniel stepped inside. The chamber was unlike the throne room. It was smaller, warmer, filled with glowing crystals and old relics placed carefully on stone shelves. In the center, Queen Serenia stood with her back to him, staring into a floating sphere of light. Images shifted inside it, maps of star systems, symbols, and faint glowing words in the Zerath language. She did not turn as she spoke. "Do you know why I summoned you here?" Daniel hesitated. "To tell me more about the prophecy?" Her voice was calm, but sharp. "To test you." Finally, she turned, her golden eyes fixed on him, measuring him as though she could read his very soul. She stepped closer, and for a moment Daniel felt as if he were being pulled into her gaze. "You said you saw the swarm in your dreams," she said. "That alone proves you are connected. But the question is how?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't understand. I'm just a man from Earth. I don't have powers, I don't have—" "Enough," Serenia interrupted. Her tone was not cruel, but final. "There is something you must see." She waved her hand, and the sphere of light shifted. The images changed to show an ancient figure, cloaked in silver robes, standing among stars. His face was hidden, but one detail stood out, a symbol carved across his chest, a cross. Daniel's breath caught. "This is the one my ancestors met," Serenia explained. "A wanderer. He appeared thousands of years ago, spoke of coming darkness, and promised to return, or send another, when the galaxy stood at the edge of ruin. He bore the same name as you, Cross." Daniel stared at the image, his skin prickling. It couldn't be real. A human, someone like him, seen thousands of years ago? Impossible. And yet, the name, the dreams, the Queen's fear, none of it was coincidence. Serenia's voice softened slightly, though her eyes remained sharp. "Tell me the truth, Daniel Cross. Has anything unusual happened to you before? Any visions? Any events you cannot explain?" Daniel thought back. He remembered times as a boy when he had dreams that later seemed to come true, though he always dismissed them as accidents. He remembered once touching an old artifact during Earth's excavation of a crashed alien vessel, how it had glowed briefly under his hand, though scientists found nothing unusual. He had told no one. But now, he wondered. Yes, Daniel admitted slowly. Things I can't explain. Visions, dreams. And once, I touched something. It reacted to me. The Queen's eyes narrowed. Show me. She led him to a table, where several alien artifacts rested. Most were broken fragments of machines, symbols etched into their surfaces. Serenia gestured to one, an old cube, cracked and lifeless. Touch it, she commanded. Daniel frowned. What is it? Relic of the First War against the Shadow Swarm. It has been dead for centuries, but I wonder... He hesitated, then slowly placed his hand on the cube. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft pulse of light spread from his palm across the surface of the artifact. Symbols glowed faintly, and the cube hummed as though awakening from sleep. Daniel yanked his hand back in shock. I didn't do anything. But Serenia's expression said otherwise. Her eyes widened slightly, and she whispered in awe, The key responds to you. Daniel stepped back, shaking his head. No, this doesn't make sense. I'm not chosen. I'm not some savior. I just want to go home. Serenia's face hardened again. And if you go home, the swarm will follow. Do you understand now? You cannot escape this, Daniel Cross. Whether you want it or not, fate has claimed you. Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to argue, to deny it all. But deep inside, he knew she was right. The dream, the relic, the prophecy. It was all connected. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then Serenia spoke again, her voice lower, almost thoughtful. When I heard your name, I thought it was a curse. Perhaps it still is. But there is another possibility, that you are the only chance left for this galaxy. I will not pretend to trust you yet, but I will not ignore what I have seen. Daniel swallowed. His throat felt dry. So what happens now? The Queen turned back to the glowing sphere. Now, we prepare. The Shadow Swarm will rise again, and you, Daniel Cross, will stand at the center of it all, whether you like it or not. That night, Daniel sat alone in his quarters, staring at his hands. They looked ordinary, human. Yet a dead relic had awakened to his touch. A queen feared. His name. And somewhere in the darkness of space, an enemy was stirring. He thought again of his dream, the burning stars, the cloaked figure, the endless swarm. This was no coincidence. But he was not ready to be the man the prophecy spoke of. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a warrior. He was just Daniel. And yet, as he looked out at the stars beyond the palace window, he whispered to himself, Then I'll have to learn. Far across the galaxy, in a region of cold, silent space, black shapes moved between the stars. They were not human. They were not Zerath. They were something older, something darker. The Shadow Swarm was awake again. 3 days after Daniel touched the ancient relic, alarms spread through the Zerath dominion. At first, it was only whispers, reports of colonies at the edge of their empire going dark, ships that vanished without warning. Then came the first images, shaky transmissions that cut off mid-scream. Black swarms, countless in number, spreading like a tide across the stars. The Shadow Swarm had returned. Daniel stood inside the war chamber of the palace, surrounded by tall projections of star maps. Zerath commanders argued fiercely, their voices sharp. Some demanded immediate retaliation, others called for defense, and a few whispered that it was already too late. Queen Serenia sat on her throne, silent as her generals quarreled. Her golden eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the noise. Enough! The chamber fell quiet. Every eye turned toward her. We will face them, she said. But this time, we do not fight alone. Her. Gaze slid toward Daniel. A ripple of unease spread through the room. Zerath commanders exchanged doubtful looks. One finally spoke. "My queen, with respect, he is only a human. How can he matter in this war?" Serenya's tone sharpened. "He matters because fate has tied him to this war. Do not question my command." Daniel felt dozens of alien eyes burning into him. He shifted uncomfortably, but stood tall. He didn't feel like a savior. He didn't feel like a leader. Yet he could not walk away now, not when he had seen what was coming. The first battle came sooner than expected. A human colony near the border, Kara 7, sent out a desperate distress call. The shadow swarm had descended on them with terrifying speed. By the time the message reached the Dominion, the colony's defenses were already falling. Daniel found himself aboard a Zerath warship for the first time. The interior was sleek, cold, built for efficiency rather than comfort. He stood on the command bridge beside Serenya, who wore dark armor instead of her royal robes. She looked every bit a warrior queen now, her silver hair tied back, her gaze sharp. "This is madness," Daniel muttered, watching the tactical display. "That colony has thousands of civilians. We can't let them be slaughtered." Serenya's voice was steady. "Then we will not." The fleet jumped through hyperspace, and the stars bent into streaks of light. Daniel gripped the railing tightly. He had never been in a real battle before. His heart pounded, his breath came shallow, but he forced himself to stand tall. When they dropped out of hyperspace, the view stole his breath. The colony floated below, its cities shining faintly on the surface of a rocky world. Above it, the void boiled with movement. The shadow swarm was there. Countless black ships, shaped like twisted blades, swarmed in the darkness, their wings pulsing with sickly green light. They moved like a living tide, hundreds turning as one, descending on the helpless colony. The Zerath fleet spread into formation. Dozens of sleek warships extended their glowing lances of energy. The queen raised her hand, and her voice rang out. "Fire!" The void exploded with light. Beams of blue energy shot across the darkness, tearing into the black swarm. Ships burst, apart in fire, their wreckage scattering. But for every swarm ship that fell, 10 more appeared, their green pulses striking back. Daniel held his breath as the warship shook from impact. Sparks flew across the bridge, and officers shouted orders in the Zerath language. Serenya stood calm in the storm, her eyes locked on the battle. Then Daniel saw it, the human colony below. The swarm was breaking through, streaks of black ships. Diving toward the surface, he felt a cold chill. If they reached the cities, thousands would die. "Serenya!" he shouted. "They're going for the civilians." The queen glanced at him, then back at the battle. "Then stop them!" Daniel froze. "Stop them? How? I'm not—" But before he could finish, another vision struck him. The world blurred, and he saw the swarm's movements before they happened, ships diving in precise patterns, weak points in their lines glowing faintly in his mind. His chest tightened. It was like the dream, but sharper, clearer. He stumbled, forward, pointing at the tactical display. "There! Aim your fire there! Cut through the swarm's flank! They won't be able to regroup!" Zerath officers looked at him in shock. Serenya studied him for a long moment, then gave a single command. "Do it." The fleet shifted. Energy lances struck the exact coordinates Daniel had pointed to. And to the astonishment of the bridge, the swarm's line shattered. Their formation broke, scattering into chaos. The humans cheered across comms. As the swarm faltered, giving their defenses a chance to hold, Daniel stood frozen, his heart hammering. He had seen it before it happened. Just like the dreams, Serenya's golden eyes fixed on him. "So, it is true." Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't understand. I shouldn't know these things." "You are what the prophecy says you are," Serenya said quietly. The swarm fears you because fate itself bends around you. The battle raged on. Hours passed like minutes. The swarm pressed relentlessly, their numbers overwhelming, but the combined might of the Zerath fleet and the humans on the ground slowly held them back. Daniel gave more warnings, pointing out attacks before they came, saving ships that would have been destroyed. Each time he spoke, the officers hesitated less, until they began to follow his words without question. Finally, as the last swarm ship was destroyed, silence fell over the void. The colony was scarred, but alive. Civilians sent up messages of thanks, their voices trembling with relief. On the bridge, Zerath officers bowed their heads to their queen, but many of them also looked at Daniel, not with disdain now, but with something closer to respect. Serenia turned to him. For once, her expression softened. You saved thousands today. Daniel shook his head. No, we all did. You only fulfilled your part of the prophecy, she said. Do not deny it, Daniel Cross. You are bound to this war now. Daniel looked out at the stars. The wreckage of swarm ships drifted like broken shadows across the void. For now, they had won. But he knew this was only the beginning. Far beyond, in the cold regions of space, the rest of the swarm was waiting, watching, preparing. The Shadow War had begun. The Battle of Kara 7 spread across the galaxy like fire. For the first time in centuries, the Shadow Swarm had been pushed back, and for the first time in history, humans and Zerath had fought side by side, yet victory did not bring peace. Reports of more swarm attacks poured in from distant systems. Colonies vanished. Trade routes went silent. The enemy was not retreating. They were testing, probing, learning, and every day their numbers seemed endless. On board the Zerath flagship, Daniel, Cross stood by a wide observation window, staring at the stars. Wreckage from the last battle still floated in the distance, broken ships drifting silently like ghosts. He pressed his hands against the glass, his reflection staring back at him. He still could not believe what he had done. The visions, the warnings, the way the fleet had followed his words as though he were a commander. He had saved lives. Yet deep inside, fear gnawed at him. What if it was just luck? What if next time he failed? Behind him, the door opened. Queen Serenia entered, wearing her dark armor again, though her silver hair was loose now. She moved silently to stand beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. I'm no soldier. I wasn't trained for this. I don't even know how I knew what I knew out there. Serenia studied him, her golden eyes calm but sharp. And yet you did. That is what matters. You are not a soldier, Daniel Cross. You are something else, something fate has prepared. Daniel gave a bitter laugh. Fate didn't ask me if I wanted this. Her gaze softened, just slightly. Fate never asks. It only chooses. They stood in silence again, but Serenia's eyes lingered on him longer this time. She had fought in wars that lasted decades. She had seen countless soldiers live and die. But this human, this ordinary man, had stood against destiny itself and refused to break. The next attack came sooner than expected. A human colony called Vera 9 sent out a desperate call for help. The swarm had surrounded them, cutting off escape. The colony's defenses were weak, built only for pirates, not for ancient horrors. This time, the queen herself led the response, with Daniel at her side. When they arrived, the sight stole the breath of every soul aboard. The swarm had gathered in numbers greater than before, thousands of black ships filling the sky like a living storm. Their green lights pulsed in unison, as though the fleet itself were alive. On the surface below, the colony's cities burned. Human civilians scattered through the streets, trying to find shelter where none existed. Open comms to the colony, Daniel ordered. His voice was steady, but his heart pounded. The screen flickered, revealing a human commander, bloodied and exhausted. Explosions roared in the background. "Whoever you are, we won't last much longer. The swarm is inside the city. We can't hold them." Daniel leaned forward. "Hold on, we're coming." The man shook his head desperately. "You don't understand. They don't stop. They don't feel fear. We're just farmers and workers. We can't. Listen to me." Daniel's voice rang louder now, firm with conviction. "You can. You're human. And humans don't surrender. Not to anyone, not to anything. Hold them back, no matter what it takes. We're bringing help." The commander stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. "Yes. Yes, sir." The comm cut off. Serenia tilted her head, her eyes unreadable. "You speak with fire. Your people will follow that fire." Daniel turned to her. "Then, let's give them something to follow." The fleet descended. Zirath warships struck first, beams of energy tearing into the swarm. Daniel's visions returned, sharp, painful flashes of movement before they happened. He guided the fleet again, calling out coordinates, predicting strikes. And once again the swarm faltered against the combined fire, but this time it wasn't enough. Too many ships broke through. "They're heading for the surface," an officer shouted. Serenia turned sharply. "Prepare ground forces!" Daniel's stomach dropped. "Ground forces? You mean us?" The Queen's lips curved faintly. "If you wish to see humanity's courage, then come and see it up close." Moments later, dropships roared toward the colony. Inside one of them, Daniel gripped his seat tightly as soldiers prepared their weapons. Zirath warriors stood calm and silent, their armor gleaming. Across from them sat human defenders, miners, farmers, and engineers, clutching rifles with trembling hands. The dropship shook violently as it entered the atmosphere. Through the small window, Daniel saw smoke, rising from burning cities. The swarm was everywhere, dark creatures tearing through streets, their blade-like limbs cutting through walls and machines alike. The dropships slammed into the ground, doors blasting open. The soldiers poured out, weapons firing. Daniel stumbled. After them, the heat of fire burning his face. He had never been in a ground battle before. Every sound was chaos, shouts, screams, blasts of energy, the unearthly shrieks of swarm creatures. Then he saw it. A group of swarm beasts broke through a building wall, charging toward a group of human civilians trapped in the street. Daniel didn't think. He ran forward, grabbing a fallen rifle from the ground. He aimed, fired wildly, the recoil nearly knocking him down. But the blasts struck true, driving the creatures back long enough for soldiers to push them away. The civilians scrambled to safety. One woman turned, her eyes wide with fear and relief. "Thank you," she cried, before disappearing into the crowd. Daniel's hands shook as he lowered the rifle. His heart pounded, but a strange fire burned inside him. For the first time, he understood what Serenia had meant. Humanity did not fight because they were strong. Humanity fought because they refused to stop, no matter how weak they seemed. Hours passed in endless combat. Humans and Zirath fought shoulder to shoulder. The swarm was relentless, but the defenders never gave in. Even miners with no training stood against the enemy, wielding tools as weapons, refusing to bow. Serenia fought at the front, her golden eyes blazing, her blade cutting through swarm after swarm. She fought like a force of nature, and Daniel could not look away. At one moment, when the swarm nearly overwhelmed them, she turned and saw Daniel rallying terrified civilians, guiding them to safety, shouting words that lit courage in their hearts. For the first time in her long rule, Serenia felt something stir inside her. Respect, and perhaps something more. By dawn, the swarm retreated. The colony was scarred but alive. Thousands had survived, not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to surrender. On the battlefield, Daniel stood among exhausted soldiers, his clothes burned and torn, his hands blistered. He looked around at the survivors, the sea of farmers, the miners, the Zerath warriors, and felt a strange pride. Serenia approached him, her silver hair streaked with ash, her armor marked with cuts. She studied him for a long moment. "You were right," she said softly. "Humanity fights with something my people do not understand. Fire in the heart, defiance even in despair." Daniel met her gaze, breathing heavily. "It's not about strength. It's about never giving up. That's what it means to be human." For the first time, Queen Serenia bowed her head, just slightly. "Perhaps that is why fate chose you." Daniel looked at the burning horizon, smoke rising into the sky. He knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The Shadow Swarm would return stronger than ever, but now humanity and the Zerath Dominion had something they had never shared before. Hope. A deep space outpost near the Zerath capital had gone dark. The last transmission showed endless black ships pouring out of the void, more than anyone had ever seen before. The Shadow Swarm was no longer testing. They were coming for the heart of the Dominion itself. If the capital fell, the galaxy would follow. Inside the command hall, tension crackled like fire. Generals shouted strategies, humans and Zerath debated fiercely, and fear whispered through every corner of the fleet. At the center of it all stood Daniel Cross. He felt the weight of countless eyes on him. They no longer looked at him as just a diplomat, not even as a soldier. They looked at him as something more, something he was still struggling to believe, himself. Queen Serenia sat tall on her throne, her face calm but her voice sharp. "This is the final stand. The swarm will not stop. If we fall here, no world will survive. We fight not for empire, not for colony, but for existence itself." Her words silenced the hall. Then she turned her golden eyes to Daniel. "And we fight with him." The officers bowed their heads in reluctant agreement. Humanity and Zerath were united now, not by choice, but by necessity. The fleets gathered. It was a sight the galaxy had never witnessed. Hundreds of human ships, scarred and patched from desperate battles, flying beside the sleek silver warships of the Zerath Dominion. Old freighters converted into gunships, mining vessels carrying missile launchers, and mighty dreadnoughts from the Dominion's core, all stood side by side. Daniel stood on the flagship's bridge, watching the armada stretch across the stars. His heart pounded, not with fear this time, but with resolve. This was it. The prophecy had brought him here, to this moment. And then the enemy arrived. The void split open as the Shadow Swarm emerged. An endless tide of black ships poured into the system, their green lights pulsing like a heartbeat of doom. There were so many that they blotted out the stars themselves. The battle began. The fleets clashed in a storm of fire and destruction. Blue beams from Zerath warships cut through the swarm. Human missiles streaked across the void, detonating in blazing bursts. Swarm ships exploded, but for everyone destroyed, 5 more replaced it. Daniel gripped the railing, his visions flashing before his eyes. He saw attacks before they came, paths of destruction before they struck. He shouted commands, his voice steady and clear. "Left flank, brace for impact. Redirect power to shields now. Strike their center line. Here, now." Fleets moved as if guided by an unseen hand. Everywhere Daniel pointed, victory followed. Ships that should have been destroyed survived. Attacks that should have broken the line were stopped cold, but even with his guidance, the swarm pressed harder. They were endless, their will unbroken. Slowly, the defenders were pushed back toward the capital. Serenia stood tall beside him, her voice ringing like steel. "We hold! Do not falter!" Her presence lit fire in her warriors, but even she could see the truth. The swarm would not be stopped by strength alone. Something greater was needed. In the middle of the chaos, Daniel's visions grew stronger. His mind burned with light and shadow. He saw the swarm not as ships, but as a single vast mind, a hive, dark and cold, spreading its hunger across the stars. And deep inside that hive, he felt a pressure, a voice whispering, "Cross." It was the same word from his dreams, the same voice that had haunted him. He understood now. The swarm feared the name. The prophecy was not only about destruction, it was about defiance. Daniel stepped forward, opening the comm channel to every ship, every soldier, every colony, listening across the stars. His voice echoed through the entire war. "My name is Daniel Cross, son of Earth. We will not surrender this galaxy. We will not let the swarm take our homes, our families, our future. Stand with me. Fight with me. Humanity does not break. And today, neither will the Dominion." His words rolled like thunder across the comms. Human miners on fragile ships raised their fists. Zerath warriors straightened with renewed pride. Across the galaxy, his name carried not as fear, but as hope. Serenia's eyes widened slightly. For the first time, she smiled, not coldly, but with something warm and rare. "You speak as one born to rule the stars." The final push began. Daniel led the fleets in one last charge. Humans and Zerath fought as one, their weapons blazing in unison. The swarm howled, their black ships crashing forward, but the defenders refused to yield. Serenia fought on the ground as the swarm tried to invade the capital, her blade flashing like silver fire. Daniel remained on the flagship, guiding the battle with visions that came faster and sharper than ever. He no longer doubted them. He no longer feared them. He embraced them. At the height of the battle, when the swarm threatened to overwhelm the capital itself, Daniel's voice cut across. "The galaxy once more, I am Cross." The words echoed not just through comms, but through the hive itself. A shock rippled through the swarm, their movements faltering, their unity breaking. The hive mind recoiled at the sound, as though the name itself was a weapon. The fleets struck, in that moment hammering the enemy with all their strength. Swarm ships shattered, their tide broken at last. Slowly, painfully, the endless darkness began to recede. The battle lasted until the stars burned with wreckage. But when silence finally returned, the swarm was gone. In the aftermath, the galaxy was forever changed. The capital still stood. Humanity still lived. The Zerath Dominion had survived. But more than that, two peoples, once divided by fear, had fought together as one. On the balcony of the palace, Daniel stood beside Queen Serenia, watching survivors cheer in the streets below. Ships flew overhead, their lights bright against the night sky. "You kept your promise," Serenia said softly. "You spoke your name, and the galaxy answered." Daniel exhaled, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion. "I only did what had to be done." The queen turned to him, her golden eyes warm with respect. "No, you did what no one else could. You are Cross, not a curse, a beacon." For a long moment they stood in silence, the sound of celebration rising around them. Daniel thought of his past life on Earth, quiet and ordinary. That life was gone forever. But as he looked at the stars, he no longer felt afraid. He felt ready. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but the future was still unwritten. And now, his name, once just a word, echoed across the stars as a symbol of defiance, unity, and hope. Daniel Cross. The man who stood against the swarm, the man who turned fear into fire, the man who proved that humanity would never be broken.